much for that very long introduction. Salam sejahtera to all my friends. Peace be upon all of you. And I'd like to thank the Islamic Renaissance Front for inviting me. This is a very hot, controversial topic. Controversial because there are so many different viewpoints. And there doesn't ever seem to be the correct view of what is happening and what should be done. I may contribute to the complication by my presentation today because it is not going to be a very straightforward attempt to explain the events that are happening. But I will try nevertheless to get my opinions out as to what I think is happening. And first of all, let me begin by saying that we should not discuss this topic without addressing the notion of global hegemony, which the US primarily represents. Number two, secondly, the discourse around the US and Chinese exceptionalism takes on different meanings depending on which power we are referring to. US exceptionalism predominantly has a positive meaning, while Chinese exceptionalism seems to always be negative in meaning. Third, if we read between the lines about the South China Sea tensions, you will actually find that the narratives reveal an aggressive US. Superficially though, the narratives highlight China as a bully, using intimidating tactics. This is a prime example of US hegemonic strategy to dominate a worldview, to manipulate thinking. Throughout my talk, well, I will present you now what my final analysis is going to be. Basically, I will be making 3 points. The first is that the South China Sea may be a new US-China battleground, but it is premised on an old American strategy, namely its quest for global hegemony. The second point is that tensions exist between ASEAN and China in the South China Sea. That is, goes without any doubt. But we should no longer allow US rhetoric to silence ASEAN's agency in managing conflict in the region. And the third point I'd like to make is that by recognizing ASEAN's agency, we highlight the dynamics of mutual cooperation and compromise outside the realm of militarism, which is what the US and its Quad allies prefer. So what do I understand? My opinion or my understanding of exceptionalism? Well, a nation is exceptional and positively exceptional if it is a society with minimal levels of ethnic, racial, or religious prejudice, if it is a society that believes in equity, equal distribution of economic output, minimal poverty level, and minimal economic inequality. A society is also exceptional in a positive manner if it provides optimal healthcare, high life expectancy, if it has a lower degree of destruction of the natural environment. An exceptional nation also prefers to engage in skilled diplomacy and negotiation over authoritarian and hegemonic tactics. So to me, that is the positive definition of what an exceptional nation is. But how did the term become misleading? Both the US and China satisfy each of these to varying degrees, what I previously just mentioned. They satisfy both these countries, satisfy them to varying degrees. But that is like most other countries. But no country should claim uniqueness. US exceptionalism claims to be unique as we hear Donald Trump saying, "Make America great again," or the previous administration, the pivot to Asia policy, it is all based off fundamental to their notion of American exceptionalism. And no country should claim the right to transform the world or dictate world order, or as we should have it. I think Peter Falk has said it's a world disorder as opposed to world order. US exceptionalism claims it is uniquely qualified to do this. By contrast, Chinese exceptionalism has a negative connotation. It is considered a bully in the South China Sea. It does whatever it wants, while the BRI is also considered exploitative. Yet the WTO, the World Bank, and the IMF are rarely classified accordingly as exploitative. So again, continuing with this, the narrative of why the term is misleading, the discourses around these two opposite connotations reveal a certain conceptual hierarchy. On the one hand, when you claim you are exceptional, you imply you are superior. In this way, nations use hierarchy to control narratives. For example, the US narrative about protecting the world from an evil rising dragon. This is a narrative that has been pushed by the West and the US and her allies. And on the other hand, the notion is also provocative, and it invokes reactions within this hierarchical dynamic. And the reaction is coming predominantly from the global South. So what are these perceptions from the global South? The US is seen as an empire which indulges in military ventures. They see China as exercising its economic and technological power with a clear and less dubious intention as a global challenger. The stress here is on the word dubious. The US is seen also as justifying its involvement in wars as if it is saving these nations or fighting terrorism or some other cause that they deem is noble, that they have to save countries from. This is the aspect of, for lack of a better word, mind control that smaller nations. My apologies to everyone. It's the new normal, as you know. So this is a technical mishap, not a human error this time. I don't have much more to say, actually, except that the important thing about this US-China conflict that has erupted and is increasingly becoming very stressful for the region, the important thing that we in Southeast Asia, specifically in ASEAN, should do now is to change the narrative of what is being bandied around in the academic circles, in the media, in research institutions, about this very one-sided conflict that's going on, meaning China is leading the way in being the aggressor, and the US and its allies and ASEAN, sandwiched in between these two, are the poor victims of a rising China. And I think this is a very wrong image of the entire conflict between these two major powers. One thing, how we can navigate this problem is for ASEAN to participate in a more active manner by changing the narrative. And by that, I mean, commentators should instead project narratives that showcase ASEAN's agency in the regional architecture and conflict management. It is time to redirect the discourse and to avoid language which portrays ASEAN on the receiving end and China as the looming threat. After all, China isn't the only looming threat in the region. We have other major powers that pose a threat to us as well. It is necessary to highlight that the Southeast Asian region has not come close to any catastrophic conflict, military conflict. It is important to highlight why this is so. Whereas Europe has encountered two major devastating world wars, Southeast Asia hasn't. We have not experienced millions and millions of deaths as a result of a global catastrophic war. ASEAN may also worry about China's geographic proximity, but it also worries about US naval and military reach in the region. This must also be highlighted. It's not that ASEAN just worries about being so close geographically to China. We are also worried that the US has the ability to reach the region in a matter of seconds or minutes because of its military presence in the region. So we cannot downplay this aspect of the threat while highlighting and blowing up the problem that China poses. So changing the conversation allows ASEAN to assert more influence in managing the conflict, in us being the agent of management of conflict in the region. So I think my last few minutes or comments will be basically about how international relations as an academic subject is approached in this region. And I'll speak about that from my experience as an academician in Malaysia. We need to revisit how IR, international relations and international politics, is taught in the universities predominantly, because it's through the academicians as well. We feed policy makers in terms of how we analyze the regional developments and their geopolitical developments regionally and globally. But there is a problem in how it is being taught, and that is why the information that we provide is also a little bit skewed in support of a hegemonic trend. IR as an academic field, after all, rose out of the ashes of World War I. It rose out of conflict, not peace. The Euro-American worldview has dominated the field. How we see geopolitics, analyze relations between countries, how we conceptualize power, how we manage conflict. It all emanates from this World War I experience and subsequently World War II and the Cold War and so forth. So as a result, IR has always been about explaining why wars happen and why we should prevent it. It is also closely related to the military hardware and the defense industry and the contracts worth millions associated with that industry. Colonialism and post-colonialism development of, post-colonial development of the developing world are less central to IR. Yet these are the very issues that are the root causes of antagonism between states that we are experiencing now. Post-colonial states are the object of big power conflict. You can see that in the Middle East, you can see that in South America, in Asia, yet colonialism and post-colonial issues associated with post-colonial states are not central to the study of IR. I see that these we can consider this anti-hegemonic discourses that find a voice within this post-colonial paradigm. So it would help to push the discourse that hegemony is what we need to fight and not any individual state, because willy-nilly a hegemon can decide which that state would be. And presently, it seems to be China. All right, my last few points. In Southeast Asia, in ASEAN, we need to reevaluate how IR is taught. The study of geopolitics, national interest, national security should be more balanced. It should pay less attention to the Western-based legalistic provisions for preventing war, and more attention to how culture and identity promote peace. Instead of perpetuating the democratic peace theory, which focuses on the absence of war among democracies, we must uphold a security order which emphasizes mutual cooperation among major and weak powers, irrespective of ideology, and which transcends state-centric frameworks. So instead of focusing on war and how to defeat a power, we should focus on combining powerful and weaker states into perpetuating peace, discussing more peace as opposed to war. All right, I think that would be the conclusion of my presentation. And once again, I'm sorry for the interruption, but nevertheless, the Q&A may be able to clear up some problems associated with that lapse. Thank you.